Hi again, and welcome to part 11 of the Revelation series. Last week we ended the second account of the end times up to the day of the Lord that ends in chapter 16. So the first account ends in chapter 11, and the second account starts in chapter 12 and ends in chapter 16. And as we saw last week, there are a number of mini accounts that are stuck within there. There are a number of visions that make up this entire big prophecy of the book of Revelation. It's a big prophecy made up of a bunch of different visions. John keeps getting these independent visions. He sees one thing, and then he sees another thing, and then he sees another thing. He sees things from all different time periods that are always related to either the two witnesses, the 144,000, or some other reliable source that is predefined in Revelation so that we know where we are at all times. After chapter 16, we come to chapters 17 and 18, which talk about the harlot. Chapter 16 ended with the day of the Lord. We saw that every island fled away, the mountains were not found, and the hail came and the earthquake. And so this is the day of the Lord that chapter 16 ends with. And then chapter 17, Verse 1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me. This angel is talking to John, saying to me, come hither, I will show you the judgment of the great whore, or the harlot, that sits upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So here we see that the kings of the earth have committed fornication with the harlot, the kings of the earth. So we see that the harlot, the great whore, sits upon many waters and it commits fornication with the kings of the earth. So it's not a king of the earth. The harlot is not itself a king of the earth. But we see that this whore has influence on all the kings of the earth, because the kings of the earth have committed fornication with the great whore. And the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sat upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, the Mother of Harlots, and abominations of the earth. Now this woman goes back, way back in time, even back to Old Testament times. In the times of Israel, back in the Old Testament, there was Baal and Ashtoreth. Now, some believe that since the Statue of Liberty is a statue of Liberta, that she has this golden cup in her hand full of the abominations of filthiness of her fornication, they think, well, it's only the United States. That's what this is. No, it isn't. It's not the United States. This woman having the cup in her hand is represented by a number of goddesses throughout the world that all have their roots in Ashtoreth. And Liberta was a goddess that was worshipped in the times of the Roman Empire, starting before 100 BC, before Jesus' time even. The Roman Empire had the goddess Liberta. The goddess Liberta was worshipped in the times of the Roman Empire way back in its beginnings. So that's why I have said previously in this video that we're still in the Roman Empire. They still do worship this false god, and she's been represented long before the Statue of Liberty ever came into existence. This woman had a golden cup in her hand in every place where she's represented. Yes, the Statue of Liberty does have the golden cup. Yes, it does. But this is a statue of Liberta. Many believe that the Statue of Liberty is a representation of freedom from slavery, and that it's a representation of freedom in general. But the Statue of Liberty is a statue to Liberta, the goddess of liberty, which was freedom in the way of fornication type of freedom. According to history, the Statue of Liberty was given to the United States by the French people. as a symbol of friendship between the two countries, but really it was actually made by a Mason, a Freemason. Frederick Bertolli was a Freemason, and he's the one who was behind the design of the Statue of Liberty, and he admittedly designed it after Liberta. Liberta was a goddess that has been around long before the United States ever started, and this was a gift from Bertolli and, by extension, from the Freemason community. It was a gift of a goddess of liberty, a licentious kind of liberty. The pagan goddess Liberta was really a representation of breaking the power of everyone who stood against a new world order. The lighted up torch was another symbol from the Masons, and it represented the sun. The Masons placed a lot of importance on the sun and basically could be called sun worshippers, as they had numerous gods and goddesses that they acknowledged, but all had their basis or their roots going all the way back to Baal and Ashtoreth. But once again, we have to remember that this was a gift to the United States long after the United States came into its existence. United States origins are from 1776, and the Statue of Liberty wasn't until 1865, many years later, and was actually given as a 100-year anniversary. So actually, the Statue of Liberty has become something to the United States that it wasn't meant to be by the French Mason who gave it to us as a gift, gave it to the United States as a gift. So yes, you could say this woman having the golden cup in her hand full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. Yes, you could say that is a representation of the Statue of Liberty, but it's not the Statue of Liberty in its origin. The Statue of Liberty is itself a representation of the goddess that has been in existence for centuries. So this predates the United States, this woman having the golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And she has been committing fornication with the kings of the earth since long before the United States ever came into existence. So the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, not red, white, and blue, but purple and scarlet. The origins of this woman with the golden cup in her hand, represented by many statues and images, not just the Statue of Liberty. It has been in existence for a long time, and it represents a satanic power. And this woman is represented in a number of different women in different countries, Britannia being one of them, and of course Liberta another. So this woman that has existed since long before even the Roman Empire came into existence, but was started to be represented by Liberta in the time of the Roman Empire. This woman is what this is talking about. It's not talking about a particular country. It's talking about a system that has been in place, a system of worshiping this goddess. And that is Mystery Babylon. It is what we call the deep state, or the cabal, the organization of people that have been trying to control the world for centuries and pretty much have succeeded for much of that time. The United States, when it was created by Christians as a republic, free from this Mystery Babylon. And the Mystery Babylon has been trying to gain control over the United States since its existence. Many believe George Washington was a Freemason, but George Washington himself said he was not a Freemason, and I have proof of that up on my website if you ever want to see it. But George Washington wasn't a Freemason. The Freemasons want you to believe that George Washington was a Freemason, because they want you to believe that they've had control this whole time. They wanted to take credit for George Washington, but George Washington was a Christian, just as a number of other of our founders were Christians. And they were going against this harlot. And the harlot has, ever since our country has come into existence, there's been people in our country that have been fighting against its origins in freedom, which is real freedom, not the freedom of Liberta, but real freedom. Freedom to live your life, freedom to worship God, and freedom, in fact, to reject God. If you don't have freedom to reject God, to reject Jesus Christ, then you don't have the freedom to accept him either. So freedom in general is what our founders were going for, because many of them were Christians. They wanted people to have freedom to choose for themselves what way they were going to go. The only way to have a choice is to have freedom. So our country was not founded as a Christian country. It was founded as a free republic, a republic that protects the rights of every individual. And that way, it's not a democracy. Because remember, in a democracy, the majority controls the minority. The minority is under the oppression of the majority. So if there's ever a majority in a democracy that is anti-Christian, they can oppress Christianity. And you'll see this in all the Muslim countries where the governments have become Muslim. There were countries that were Christian that have become Muslim countries because they were democracies. Democracy is not protection against evil government. It's the control of the majority. And once you have a majority that will control things that is in line with the way this woman, Mystery Babylon, wants them, then they're taken over by Mystery Babylon, by this harlot, this world system. Democracy is the enemy of freedom. So is communism. So is socialism. They're all enemies of freedom. The answer is a republic, a free republic like what we have in the United States that protects every individual's rights. So with that background, we see that this woman, she's been around for a long time. And this is basically the goddess that has been worshipped since the beginning of the Roman Empire and has its roots before that even. And verse 6, that explains why in verse 6 it says, "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints." In other words, this woman has opposed the saints, those who believe in Jesus Christ, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So this woman opposes Jesus Christ, opposes the freedom that Jesus Christ gives, which is true freedom. "And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said to me, 'Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. That is carrying this woman. The woman is, remember, this form of worship of the goddess Liberta, which goes all the way back to Baal and Ashtoreth. It's opposition against God is what this woman represents. And we see that the beast carries the woman. So the woman is carried by the beast. But it says in verse 8, "The beast that you saw was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit." Okay, that's a reference to the Antichrist. "And go to perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is." So this is a very telling sentence here. In chapter 17, verse 8, it tells us very plainly that they that dwell on the earth shall wonder. And who are they? They're those whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world when they behold the beast. So who beholds this beast that was and is not and yet is? They that dwell on the earth. Now basically that's a reference to everyone who dwells on the earth at this time. Their names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, and they're the ones who behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. They're the ones who behold him. And as we saw earlier, that's because the rapture happens, and that's when the beast is revealed. The Antichrist cannot be revealed until the church is taken out of the way, because we have authority over Satan. So verse 9, "And here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and another is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goes to his perdition." Okay, the beast is the 8th king, because it's talking about kings here. There are 7 kings, and the beast is the 8th. So the time of the Antichrist is after the church is raptured. So he becomes the 8th king when the church is raptured. That's when he becomes this 8th king. And that tells us that there have been 7 kings before the Antichrist. 5 of them are fallen at the time he's talking to John right now. Because remember, he's talking to John on the island of Patmos. And he tells him 5 of them are fallen, 1 is, and another is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. Now, many believe that because he's talking to John, this angel is talking to John on the island of Patmos, he's talking about the Roman Empire and how 5 kings had fallen of the Roman Empire and 1 was. So there was 6 altogether. And another had not yet come. So there's a number of ways to interpret this, but the most important thing is to interpret who the woman is. This woman, this system of anti-God, The system of worshiping false gods is drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. It's anti-God. It's oppression against Christianity, against belief in Jesus Christ. The woman is drunken with the blood of the saints, and this woman has this golden cup in her hand, and she's always represented with this golden cup in her hand in all these interpretations of her as Britannia or Liberta. So Mystery Babylon is opposition against God. It's the worship of idols. It's the worship of false gods, which is why earlier on in Revelation, in the letters to the churches, Jesus always stated how he opposed those who were involved in the worship of idols and false gods, because this system dated all the way back to the time those early churches were in existence. There was a time I believed that the 7 kings were the presidents of the United States. There was a time I believed that, but just because I know that the beast himself was a president of the United States, the Antichrist. But the more I look at it, I see that he was also a member of the whole system, the Mystery Babylon system. So it's a mistake to say just because the Statue of Liberty is mentioned here that it's the United States that it's talking about, because it's not. Washington, D.C. is one of the 3 representations of Mystery Babylon. The Bank of London being the financial end, the Vatican being the spiritual end, and Washington, D.C. being the military power of Mystery Babylon. And that's how it's been up until the time that the military has now been dismantling this system in the United States, where Washington, D.C. has been trying to take apart the United States since Washington, D.C. is in the United States. Remember, Washington, D.C. is not a state. Washington, D.C. is in the District of Columbia. D.C., District of Columbia. It's not one of the states. It's not one of the states of the United States. In fact, if you look at the history of the Constitution, there is a Constitution that is for Washington, D.C. and doesn't really apply to our whole entire country. I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but Washington, D.C. is not actually a state of the United States. It's outside of the United States. And Mystery Babylon's military representation being Washington, D.C. doesn't incriminate the whole United States. The United States was started with good intentions by good people. So we see that the beast that was and is not, he is the 8th king, and he's of the 7. So he's of the 7 kings that were before him, and goes into perdition. And those 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So that really talks about how this 8th king is associated with Mystery Babylon. She rides on the beast. And the beast is of the 7, and he's of these 7 kings, and he goes into perdition. That's the Antichrist. And the 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, or at one time with the beast. And that'll be after the Antichrist is revealed, after the church is raptured. That's when these 10 kings will receive power, and they will side with the Antichrist to oppose Jesus when he returns on the day of the Lord. And we know that the kings of the earth are gathered. Sure enough, they are gathered with the Antichrist to oppose Jesus on the day of the Lord. So verse 13, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Why? Because they're in opposition against God, in opposition against Jesus Christ. And then it makes that very plain here. It says, they have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, and these shall make war with the Lamb. So that tells you plainly that these 10 kings are the ones who gather with the Antichrist on the day of the Lord to oppose Jesus Christ. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. When does that happen? The day of the Lord. So those are the kings that are gathered with the Antichrist to oppose Jesus on the day of the Lord. Those are these 10 kings, and they all are in power after the church is raptured. So these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, which where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So this tells us the many waters that the woman sits on. It says that the woman sits, this great horse sits on many waters. And now here it tells us that the waters that you saw where the horse sits are peoples Not one people, they're not one nation, they're peoples and multitudes and nations, plural, and tongues. So, in other words, the harlot has influence over many nations. This is the system, the anti-God system. The system of the harlot is Liberta, the worship of Liberta, the worship of Baal and Ashtoreth, basically, that goes back before the Roman Empire even. And that's the woman that the Statue of Liberty was built to represent as a gift to the United States. And once again, that gift to the United States has become a symbol to the United States that is very different than the intention of the creator, Bertolli, who was a Freemason. And he meant it to represent the goddess Liberta. But the symbol, what it means to the American people, is a different thing altogether, because to us it symbolizes freedom from tyranny. So you could say that the whore trying to gain power over the United States is still trying to gain power over the United States and doesn't entirely have it, although there's been lots of infiltration by the whore into the United States government. And we're seeing that being dismantled before our very eyes right now. But it makes it very clear here that the whore is not one singular nation. The waters that the whore sits on are many peoples. There are many peoples, multitudes, nations, plural, and tongues. Many people speak different languages. So that tells you that the woman is not a nation, but the woman has influence over all the nations. The kings committed fornication with her because it's a system of worshiping false gods. It's a system that is anti-God and opposes Jesus Christ and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because really, of course, Satan is behind it. So then verse 16, the 10 horns which you saw upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So here you see the separation. Because remember, it says in verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, not with the whore, but with the beast. The beast is a leader of a particular country who will get the whole world's kings to work with him. And that's how we can see that this Antichrist, we know that he was one of the presidents of the United States, and that he was one of the presidents who was trying to dismantle the United States and take away our freedoms. And he was basically completely opposed by President Trump, who was bringing back the freedoms of the people and opposing this tyrannical oppression of the harlot. So think what you want about Donald Trump, but he actually did great good and was undoing the power of the harlot on the United States. But then, of course, when Donald Trump left, the harlot has continued to try to take over the United States and to make it what the harlot wants, which is anti-God and opposed to Jesus Christ and opposed to the gospel. But the 10 kings, they receive power as kings with the beast. This is after the rapture. After the rapture, these 10 kings have power with the beast, not with the harlot, but with the beast. And remember, the harlot rides on the beast. But China is mainly Buddhist, and there are Hindus and Muslims in many other countries that are going to work with the beast. They're going to be outside of the harlot's system. But these 10 kings, they're going to side with the beast. They work 1 hour with the beast. They oppose Jesus Christ. That's the thing that joins them together with the beast, is that they oppose Jesus Christ. But the 10 horns, they hate the whore. They don't like the whore, who's represented by the worship of Baal and Ashtoreth and the worship of Liberta. Some of them are even communists. Some of these 10 horns, these kings are communist, which opposes the idea of worshiping gods at all. Even pagan gods are not accepted by communist countries. They hate the whore because the whore basically has taken advantage of them. The system of the harlot has taken advantage of the kings of the earth. And that's a story in itself. That's a political story that I'm not going to get into now. And they shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now that's talking about the harlot. It's not talking about the beast. It's talking about the harlot. And the harlot is the system of worshiping Baal and Ashtoreth, of Liberta, which is the worship of false gods and goddesses. The worship of Satan is what it really comes down to. But the woman itself, that system, will be made desolate and naked. But that's because the Antichrist, the beast, is the main character. Who did the dragon give his power to? He didn't give it to the whore. See, Satan didn't give his power to the people that were under the control of the thinking of worshiping false gods. He wanted to destroy them just as much as anybody. Remember, Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to kill even the people who worship Baal and Ashtoreth. He wants all of them dead. Remember, one of the things they did is sacrifice people. They sacrificed children and they sacrificed people to their false gods, Baal and Ashtoreth. Satan has never cared about any human being because we're made in the image of God. He doesn't like any of us. But his whole intention here is to make war with the Lamb. They shall make war with the Lamb. His whole intention is to oppose the Lamb. That's the Antichrist's objective, is to oppose the Lamb, Jesus Christ. And the dragon gave his power and authority to the beast, not to the woman, not to the harlot, but to the beast. Notice that the harlot rides on the beast. Okay, so these 10 horns, they're upon the beast. These horns are upon the beast. They work with the beast. They hate the whore, not the beast. They're never able to hurt the beast. They hate the whore, the religious system, and they make her desolate, and they eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So the religious system is going to be destroyed. The system of Baal and Ashtoreth, the worship of the false god, Liberta, all that's going to be destroyed in the name of opposing Jesus Christ, because everyone will worship the beast. Remember, everyone on earth will worship the beast, and that's Satan. That's not any religious system. That's not any idols. It's not a false god Ashtoreth. It's not Liberta. See, she's going to be taken apart. That religious system is not going to exist anymore because all who live on the earth will worship the beast. We read that before. Everyone on the earth will worship the beast. They won't worship Baal and Ashtoreth anymore. In other words, they will directly worship the beast. So her religious system is going to be destroyed. The harlot system is going to be destroyed. For God has put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast. These 10 kings, they give their kingdoms unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. They don't give it to the harlot. They give it to the beast. Just because the harlot rode on the beast, well, the beast doesn't need the harlot. The harlot's riding on the beast. In other words, the religious system was dependent on the beast. The beast wasn't dependent on the religious system. So these 10 kings, they gave their kingdoms and power to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. And the woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So the woman, the harlot, she sits on many waters, and the waters are peoples, multitudes, plural, nations, plural, and tongues. So many nations and tongues are influenced by the whore, because she sits on many nations and tongues. And the woman they saw was that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, why didn't that angel tell John the name of a city? He said that great city, because that city was not in existence yet. And that city, of course, is Washington, D.C. That's where the center is. The central worship of false gods is centered in Washington, D.C. It's not the Vatican. The Vatican, yes, it's involved in the world system, but Washington, D.C. has become the city that represents the harlot. So it says the woman is not a country. It's not a country. It is that great city, because that city didn't exist at the time of John. So the angel says that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. That's how John needed to see it represented. And of course, what is that? That's Washington, D.C. In other words, Washington, D.C. has the military power to allow it to reign over the kings of the earth. That's one leg of the three-headed system that includes the Vatican and the Bank of London and represents the harlot. The harlot is a religious system that will be destroyed in the name of worshiping the beast, the Antichrist. So the woman is represented by a great city, and that is, as we know now, Washington, D.C. We can see that in verse 7, the angel said he would tell the mystery of the woman, and that the beast that carries her, so in other words, the woman is dependent on the beast, not the other way around. The beast is the one the dragon gives his authority to, not Mystery Babylon, the harlot. But verse 9 tells us that here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And if we look at the interlinear, we see that this word mountains is or. And if we look at the meaning of that word, it's a mountain or a hill. And if you look at the places where this word is mentioned, a city set on a hill, that's the same word here, hill. When it refers to the Mount of Olives, that was a hill. It wasn't a mountain. You didn't have to climb a mountain to get on the Mount of Olives. No, that was a hill. Now, you don't have to really agree with me on this if you don't want to, but I have a particular view of this because I know that the woman, Washington, D.C. is involved with this woman, and the worship of these false gods does originate in Washington, D.C. It's what we call the deep state or the cabal, which its main headquarters is Washington, D.C. And yes, it really does have 7 hills, and I've outlined them in this graphic. Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Floral Hills, Forest Hills, Hillbrook, Hillcrest, and Knox Hill. But it's pretty clear without seeing that the woman is represented by Washington, D.C., that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Well, what city reigns over the kings of the earth? If you ask anyone in the world right now what that city would be, they'd say, well, that's got to be Washington, D.C. If it's a city, it's going to be Washington, D.C. And remember, the Statue of Liberty, even though that's in New York, that was given as a gift to the United States by Freemasons. Not by France, but by Freemasons as a goddess. Because they wanted to make the United States worship the goddess. So then chapter 18, verse 1. After these things I saw another angel come down out of heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. So here's another vision. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now this is a clear reference to the whore, Mystery Babylon. All the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Well, that's what we read in the previous chapter. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. We saw that in the previous chapter. That's talking about this religious system. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies, because that system was gaining control over the whole world and was involved in all the trade. And if you know anything about the deep state, the cabal, how they tried to rule the world, that have their headquarters in those 3 heads that I talked about, the merchants of the earth, they were waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. That's that religious system worshiping false gods, worshiping Liberta. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not her plagues. Now, I've heard many people say, well, this is talking about people leaving the United States. No. The woman's not the United States. Come out of her. What's it talking about? Mystery Babylon. What is that? It's a religious system. In other words, there were Christians who were involved in the system, who were dealing with this system, who were either tempted to or committed fornication with this system. They worked with this system, the whore of Babylon. And the merchants of the earth, they waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So here he's saying, come out of her, my people. In other words, there's Christians on the earth that were either tempted to or worked with the harlot, which is the religious system that controls much of the economy of the world, even right now. So this voice in heaven is saying this outside of any vision and any time period. Because remember, this woman's already in existence. This religious system's already in existence. So outside of any time period here, we're being told by this angel, come out of her. Don't deal with this religious system, this financial system that wreaks havoc, that rules the world. Come out of her. Stay separate from that world system, that one world system that they're trying to bring about. That you be not partakers in her sins. In other words, don't partake in the sins. What are those sins? Those are the pagan rituals, the pagan practices of the harlot. That you receive not of her plagues. There's plagues that come as a result of worshiping Baal and Ashtoreth. Because Baal and Ashtoreth, remember, you worship those false gods. Well, Satan wants to destroy all those people. He had no problem destroying the harlot when he gave the beast the power, and he wanted the 10 kings to work with the beast. He'd go ahead and let the 10 kings destroy the harlot. He didn't care about the harlot. He wants to destroy everybody. Obviously, if you come under the power of the harlot, you basically become a target for Satan. You have no protection, and you become someone who could receive her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven. We saw that the blood of the saints is on her head. In other words, she represents the opposition against God. Those who have opposed Christianity, those are members of the harlot. Her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Reward her as she has rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she has filled to her double. How much she has glorified herself and lived so deliciously. That's the deep state. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow. This is the deep state to the absolute core. If anyone who understands the deep state and what they are right now in this world, you can see this is what they think. I sit as a queen, I am no widow, I shall see no sorrow. These people are the people involved in pedophilia, in child trafficking, in trafficking of women, all these evil things in this world. That's these people. Therefore shall her plagues come on her in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judges her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. So we can see here that this system is going to take a huge hit and is going to be overcome. And that's because once the beast is on the earth, he's the one the devil is going to concentrate his power and authority on. The woman's not needed anymore once the Antichrist is on the earth. So the woman is going to be destroyed when the Antichrist comes into power, because the woman is not needed. The woman is actually a hindrance to the Antichrist, because people would worship false gods and pagan gods instead of Satan, instead of the Antichrist. Because it says all that live on the earth will worship the Antichrist, the beast. They'll worship him. They all have to worship the image of the beast. That means they're not worshiping the pagan gods anymore, Baal and Ashtoreth. They're not involved with Liberta anymore. The woman's system is defeated. It's completely defeated. So when her system is defeated, she'll be utterly burned with fire. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, they shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning. In other words, those who are in cahoots with the woman, who are in the system, the religious system with the woman, they will see her destruction. They will lament because they benefited from it. These kings of the earth that it's talking about here, they're the ones who benefited from her. So they will lament her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that's the whore, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise anymore. Now, let's look at what their merchandise is. The merchandise is of gold and silver and precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, thyron wood, all manners of ivory, vessels of precious wood, of brass, iron, marble, cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. These people, this is what's being dealt by these people. Now remember, this is what this woman has been dealing with, slaves and souls of men. This is the merchandise of the woman, the harlot. This is her merchandise. It includes people, human trafficking, slaves, and souls of men, people. And we can only imagine the depth of that when it says the souls of men. But it tells you how evil this is, the merchandise of this harlot. This is Babylon it's talking about, that great city Babylon, the system that is represented by Washington, D.C. The merchandise is slaves and souls of men. This is the religious system that has been exposed and is being exposed. This is what we call the deep state, or what we call the cabal, involved in all kinds of terrible evils. Then verse 14, and the fruits that your soul lusted after are departed from thee. Because now they're completely destroyed, and all of the things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and you shall find them no more at all. When Jesus told the story of the weeds and the tares, first the weeds are gathered together to be burned. They're not burned, but they're gathered together to be burned. In other words, they're going to be put on trial. That's when the rapture is going to happen. When that happens, the rapture is going to happen, because that's when the wheat is brought into the barn, is when the tares are gathered to be burned. In other words, they're going to go to trial. They're going to be demanded to explain what they've done, which is going to be impossible for them, of course. And of course, the Antichrist is one of the people who's worked with this system, and that's why he has a fatal wound that is healed, because he's part of that system that is gathered together to be burned. And that system's not needed anymore after the church is gone, because remember, everyone will worship the beast after the Antichrist comes to power. That's who the dragon gives his authority to, not the woman. No, he gives it to the beast. And so the religious system of the woman, the harlot, is no longer needed. The woman rides on the beast. In other words, the woman was involved with the beast before he came to power. And the beast will survive. The beast will survive despite his association with the woman. So the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. And they'll weep over this great city. For in 1 hour so great riches came to naught. Every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, say, what is like unto this great city? Because this religious system controlled the entire finances of the world. I mean, the entire world economic system is based on the harlot. Remember, the private Western Central Bank was created by the harlot. So the world economies are all affected by this woman being destroyed. And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, thou great city, wherein you made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour was she made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it to the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall no more be heard at all in you, and no craftsman, of whatever craft he be, shall be found any more in you, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more in you at all. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more in all of thee. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, and by your sorceries were all nations deceived. This tells you everything you need to know. By your sorceries. It's talking about the harlot. It's talking about the financial system that all these nations, these merchants were made rich by her. And by your sorceries were all nations deceived. That tells you everything you need to know about the harlot. The harlot was the religious system these people used. These people represented by the Bank of London and Washington, D.C. and the Vatican. By your sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and all that were slain upon the earth. This mystery Babylon was a source of evil on the earth. And notice that in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that were slain on the earth. Oh, why would that be? That would be because Satan was using the woman all the way up until he gave power to the Antichrist, the beast. And what does Satan have power over? Hebrews 2:14. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanities, Jesus did, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death. That is the devil. In other words, who has the power of death? Who holds the power of death? That is, who holds the power of death? The devil. Jesus came to destroy him who holds the power of death. That is the devil. The devil's the one who holds the power of physical death on this earth. And we saw in Revelation chapter 18 that in the harlot controlled by Satan, was found the blood of the prophets and the saints and all who have been killed on the earth. Who has the power of death? That's Satan. So the harlot was who was used by Satan all the way up until the Antichrist was revealed when the church was raptured. Then the harlot was no longer needed because the Antichrist was the focus of Satan's power. Satan gave all his power and authority to the Antichrist. Remember, it tells us in chapter 13 and verse 2 that the dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and his great authority. Well, that leaves no power or throne or authority for the harlot, does it? Because we know the harlot was opposed to God too. It opposed God. The harlot was in opposition to God. And the dragon, when the church is raptured, that's when the Antichrist is revealed. And at that time, the dragon gave the beast, the Antichrist, his power and his throne and his great authority, which leaves no power for the harlot. The harlot is no longer in power when the Antichrist comes to power. So I'm going to stop right here, but we've gotten through chapters 17 and 18, and next week we're going to go into the day of the Lord, which I probably could have gotten into this week instead of going into the harlot, but I'm just going through it in order. I'm going through it chapter by chapter through the whole book of Revelation, so I figured I might as well cover chapters 17 and 18 first, and then we'll go into the day of the Lord next week. So that's part 11. Thanks for watching.